Hello and welcome to this StiebeLtron online seminar. This session will cover the accessories that we connect to our 200, 400 and 700 litre floor standing buffer tanks. My name's John Felgate. I've been working with StiebeLtron for about 15 years. I trained at university as a product designer, and then I worked in Australia, Malaysia and around the Middle East. Now I'm raising my family in the UK. This presentation is about the benefits of our buffer tank accessories, specifically the ones that connect to our 200, 400 and 700 litre tanks. I'll speak about each of the mechanical components listed here on the slide. I'll speak about them in turn, and you'll see that as we move through the presentation they build up to make a complete kit. I'll also mention the electric immersion heater, which is used to boost or back up the heating system. First up is the WPKI-6. To understand the benefits of this kit, we need to look at a standard hydraulic sketch. The WPKI-6 accessory kit is made up of 4 main parts, which are mounted on the front of the buffer tank. The top 3 connections are the same, but the bottom one is multifunctional, and I'll show you the details of that in a few slides' time. Just to talk you through the sketch here with my laser pointer, warm water flows out of the heat pump through this circulating pump and, importantly, a non-return valve before entering the top section of the buffer tank. The return comes out of the bottom port of the buffer tank and back to the heat pump. And this circuit runs until the temperature in the buffer tank has been reached, or your target temperature in the buffer tank has been reached. On the secondary side, this pump station, labelled 3C, takes warm water from the top of the buffer and pushes it around the building. The return comes down to the bottom section of the buffer tank. And again, that circuit runs until the temperature in the building has been reached. This symbol represents an expansion vessel, which helps to maintain the correct pressure in the system. And this little T shape represents a drain port, which you can use to drain the water out of the system if you need to carry out some maintenance work. Here you can see what's supplied in the box. My thanks to my Swiss colleagues for the picture. The kit's supplied with all the washers and parts that you need to install. You get 3 of these with the WPKI-6 kit. They should be installed on the top 3 2-inch ports of the buffer tank. The washer forms a seal between the flat face of this fitting and the port on the side of the buffer tank. You can use a hex key to open and close the integral ball valve. Like that. This is an 1.25 inch female thread, so you'll need to buy a fitting to connect to this. For an example, an 1.25 inch male iron to 28mm compression fitting. This fits to the bottom port of the buffer tank. The 1.25 inch port is used for the heat pump return pipe. You can use either of the 3/4 inch ports to connect the expansion vessel for the heating system and blank off the one you don't use. There's also a quarter turn valve which acts as a drain point. And as with the other fittings, there's an integral ball valve which you can close if you need to isolate the buffer tank for maintenance, like that. Here you can see the components fitted to the buffer tank. The fittings with the ball valves are on the top 3 ports and the multi-use fitting on the bottom. And this comes with a pre-molded insulating jacket. And this is much easier than trying to insulate the fitting using tape. Now I'll present the WPKI5 first and then the BBI5. The WPKI5 is similar to the WPKI6. However, one of the simple fittings with the integral ball valve has been replaced with a fitting that allows you to mount a circulating pump, a temperature and pressure gauge, and a pressure relief valve on the front of the buffer tank, which saves space on the plant room wall. Also, this fitting has a non-return valve built in, so there's quite a lot of components integrated into this one fitting. Again, here are the parts that are supplied in the box, everything you need to fit it.
This fitting attaches to the second port down on the buffer tank. Here's the 2-inch port which goes against the buffer tank. You can see that there's a non-return valve or a check valve. Here's the spring valve in there. There's also a service valve, which is a ball valve that you can use to isolate the buffer if you need to drain the system. Here's a pressure relief valve for the heating system, and you connect to a discharge pipe coming off here. There's a pressure gauge which is used to give you a quick visual indication of the pressure in the heating system. Here is a port which allows you to hang a circulating pump directly underneath this fitting, so that would be the buffer loading pump. And lastly, there's a dry port here where you can fit the temperature gauge which is supplied, so you can have an idea as to what the temperature in the heating system is.
This is what the components look like when they're installed, complete with the moulded insulation parts that we supply. This image shows you what comes in the box. You can see the arm that I described along with the washers and fittings. You can also see the moulded black insulation parts.
This fitting is the BBI5 and it connects directly below the buffer loading pump, and it allows you to fit a second circulating pump, let's say the domestic hot water cylinder loading pump, onto this port, so the 2 pumps sit side by side. The important thing is that there's a non-return valve factory fitted, and that's to prevent one pump from sucking water backwards through the other pump.
Here you can see what the components look like when they're installed. You can see how compact the installation is. Imagine trying to build up a similar system with separate components. That would definitely take up more space and would take more time. This way is quicker, more space efficient, and there's less chance of mistakes. Also, the insulation parts are more effective and better looking than trying to wrap the assembly with insulating tape. I should say, because the moulded insulation parts fit so well, the parts I've described can be used for cooling systems as well. They protect against condensation. One thing to note, if the water is being drawn backwards through one of the pumps shown here, the ring of LED lights goes red. Even if there's no electric power to the pump, the impeller of the pump acts like a little generator that makes enough electricity to light the warning LEDs. And this happens if one of the non-return valves fail, usually because it has something stuck in it. Now I'll describe the BGC 45 immersion heater, which can be used as a boost or a backup. One of these immersion heaters can be installed in the top of the 200 or 400 litre buffer tanks, and you can install 2 in the top of the 700 litre tank. The connected load can be set between 2 and 6 kilowatts, depending on how you wire it and whether you use a single or 3-phase supply. The 200, 400 and 700 litre buffer tanks have an 1.5 inch female threaded port that's used to connect the BGC element. One thing to be aware of is that the heat pump controller is not capable of switching this element directly. The element draws too much power for the small relays inside the heat pump controller. So the installer has to supply and fit a contactor or relay that is capable of switching the connected load.
This is the BGC 45 heating element. The 45 stands for this 45mm extension piece that acts as a spacer. Without it, the body of the element would hit the foam insulation that surrounds the buffer tank. I'm going to remove the cover now by removing the screws and the black dial. So now the cover's off, you can see the electrical terminals, L1, L2, L3 and neutral. This heater is suitable for 3-phase or single-phase electric supply. And here's the earth terminal. This blue component can be flipped to limit the temperature to 45 or 60 degrees C. And I'll show you a close-up picture showing the temperatures moulded into the plastic. The cables run through a thermal cutout here, which can be reset by pressing the brown reset button, which is just under here. When I'm commissioning the unit, I place a clamp meter around one of the live cables, like that. And if I get a reading, usually about 8 amps, then I know the electric supply is okay, the thermostat's okay, and the cutout's okay.
So I've spoken about the WPKI6, the WPKI5 with that BBI5 domestic hot water arm, and the BGC immersion heater. I hope you understand now what these accessories are and a little bit about the benefits they offer. If there are any questions, please drop me an email. You can see my email address on the slide here, and I'll do my best to help. Thanks for your time.